One letter arrived in a mailbox in Nevada last spring, and it changed everything a retired firefighter thought he knew about his own benefits. He almost threw it away. He almost missed it completely. And if you are watching this right now, there is a good chance you have already missed something just like it. Because today, we are going to talk about 5 Social Security benefits that most Americans over 55 have never even heard of. Benefits that could be sitting in your file right now, unclaimed, unnoticed, or just plain misunderstood. Welcome to Prime Move Guide. If this is your first time here, we cover Social Security, SSDI, SSI, Medicare, and retirement planning every single week. And we try to explain it the way a neighbor would explain it to you, not the way a government pamphlet does. If that sounds helpful, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because we are not going to interrupt this video asking again. Let's get into it. I want you to meet 3 people first. Not because their stories are unusual, but because their stories are common. What happened to them could happen to you, your parents, or your neighbor down the street. Michael is 67 years old. He spent 31 years as a firefighter in Reno, Nevada, and he has been collecting his Social Security retirement benefit for about a year now. Donna is 71, lives outside Charlotte, North Carolina, spent most of her working life as a librarian, and today she receives SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income, a benefit for people with very limited income and resources. And then there is Anthony, 61 years old, a former electrician from Central Illinois who has been receiving SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, ever since a back injury forced him to stop working 5 years ago. 3 different states, 3 different jobs, 3 completely different paths into the Social Security system, but all 3 of them, without knowing it, were sitting on benefits they never claimed. Let's start with Michael, because his story is the one that started this whole conversation. Michael retired from the fire department at 62, and like a lot of people, he started collecting his Social Security retirement benefit almost immediately. Nobody told him about something called delayed retirement credits, and honestly, most people never hear those words until it is too late to use them. Here is what that phrase actually means. In plain English, for every year you wait past your full retirement age, up until age 70, your monthly Social Security check gets permanently bigger. We are talking about roughly an 8% increase for each full year you delay, on top of the normal cost of living adjustments. That is not a one-time bonus. That is a permanently higher check every single month for the rest of your life. Michael did not know this. He is not alone. Millions of Americans claim the moment they become eligible, without ever running the numbers on what waiting even a year or 2 could have meant. Now, to be fair, waiting is not always the right move. If you need the income right away, or if your health makes a longer life expectancy less likely, claiming early can absolutely be the smarter choice. There is no universal right answer here. But here is what most people don't realize. This decision is one of the most permanent financial choices you will ever make, and almost nobody sits down and explains it clearly before people pull the trigger. We will come back to Michael in a moment, because his story does not end there. But first, let's talk about Donna. Donna worked as a librarian for almost 30 years, but her income was modest, and after some medical expenses drained her savings, she ended up qualifying for SSI. Most people think SSI and Social Security retirement are the same thing. They are not. SSI is a needs-based program funded by general tax revenue, not by the Social Security Trust Fund, and it is meant to help people with very limited income and resources, whether or not they ever worked long enough to qualify for regular Social Security. Here is the hidden rule that changed things for Donna. Many SSI recipients do not realize they may also qualify for something called Medicare Savings Programs, sometimes just called MSPs. These are state-run programs that can help pay your Medicare Part B premium, and in some cases, your deductibles and copays too. Medicare Part B, if you are not familiar with the term, is the part of Medicare that helps cover doctor visits and outpatient medical care. For someone living on a fixed income, having that premium covered can free up over $100 a month. Donna had been paying that premium out of her own pocket for 2 years before a caseworker mentioned the program almost by accident. There is another rule that often causes confusion here too, because SSI recipients frequently qualify automatically for full Medicaid coverage in their state. And many people do not realize that Medicaid can work alongside Medicare to cover costs that Medicare alone does not. If you are on SSDI or you know someone who is, it is worth calling your state Medicaid office just to ask directly whether you qualify for one of these Medicare savings programs. It costs nothing to ask, and the savings can be significant. Now, back to Anthony for a moment, because his situation reveals one of the most overlooked benefits in the entire system. Anthony has been on SSDI for 5 years. What he did not know until his daughter asked a question at Thanksgiving dinner is that his 16-year-old daughter might be eligible for a monthly benefit of her own based on his work record. This is sometimes called a child's benefit, and it is available to unmarried children under 18 or up to 19 if they are still in high school of a parent who is receiving Social Security retirement or disability benefits or who has passed away. Anthony assumed that because he was disabled and not deceased, his kids were not entitled to anything extra. That assumption cost his family thousands of dollars over several years. When he finally called the Social Security Administration and asked directly, he learned his daughter qualified for a monthly payment based on his disability benefit, and it did not reduce what he received himself. Family members, including a spouse caring for a child, or a child under certain conditions with a disability that began before age 22, can sometimes qualify for benefits on a parent's record that nobody in the family ever thinks to ask about. Here's what most people don't realize about this rule. There is a limit, called the family maximum, on the total amount a family can receive on one worker's record, usually somewhere between 150 and 180% of the worker's own benefit. But even with that cap, many families are receiving far less than the maximum simply because nobody applied for the additional benefits they were entitled to. Let's go back to Donna one more time, because there is a myth surrounding her situation that we need to correct clearly. A lot of people believe that if you ever receive SSI, you can never also receive a small Social Security retirement benefit. That is false. It is entirely possible to receive both, particularly if you worked enough years to qualify for a very modest Social Security check. But that check alone falls under the SSI income limit. In that case, SSI can supplement your Social Security payment up to the maximum SSI amount for your state. Donna did not know this either, and it turned out she had enough work credits from her earlier years as a part-time library assistant to qualify for a small monthly Social Security payment in addition to her SSI. It was not a huge amount, but for someone living paycheck to paycheck, it made a real difference. Now here is something that surprises many retirees, and this next one applies to almost every single person watching this video, whether you are on retirement, SSDI, or SSI. It is called the lump sum death payment. If a Social Security beneficiary passes away, their surviving spouse, or in some cases a dependent child, may be eligible for a one-time payment of $255 to help with final expenses. Now, before you roll your eyes at that number, because yes, it has stayed the same since the 1950s, and everybody agrees it does not come close to covering funeral costs today, the point is not the dollar amount. The point is that thousands of families every year never even apply for it, simply because they do not know it exists, or they assume the funeral home or the government will handle it automatically. It will not. A surviving spouse who was already living with the deceased at the time of death, or who was already receiving benefits on their spouse's record, generally needs to specifically claim this payment, and there is a 2-year window to do it. If you are the widow or widower of someone who passed away recently, or if you know a friend or neighbor in that situation, it is worth making one phone call to the Social Security Administration just to check. We should also mention, since this comes up constantly in the comments on these kinds of videos, that there has been talk in Congress about raising that $255 amount significantly, potentially into the thousands, to better reflect today's funeral costs. As of right now, that is proposed legislation, not law, so treat it as a rumor until you hear it confirmed directly from the Social Security Administration or a major news outlet. We will keep you updated if anything changes. Let's circle back to Michael one final time, because there is one more layer to his story that surprised even him. Michael was married once for 11 years before he and his first wife divorced. He remarried years later, And honestly, he had completely forgotten about that first marriage when it came to his Social Security planning. What he did not realize is that if a marriage lasted at least 10 years and the person is currently unmarried, they may be entitled to claim a spousal benefit based on their ex-spouse's work record, even if that ex-spouse has remarried. This is often called a divorced spouse benefit, and here's the part that surprises almost everyone. Claiming this benefit does not affect the ex-spouse's own benefit at all, and the ex-spouse does not even need to know that you applied. For Michael, this did not change much, since his own benefit based on his firefighting career was higher than anything he would have gotten from his ex-wife's record. But for many people, particularly those who left the workforce for years to raise children or support a spouse's career, the divorced spouse benefit can end up being significantly higher than what they would receive on their own record. If you were married for 10 years or longer, and you are now divorced and unmarried, it is worth checking your options even if you assume your own work history makes you ineligible for anything extra. Let's pause here and talk about a mistake that connects all three of these stories, because it is the same mistake, wearing three different disguises. Michael assumed the Social Security Administration would tell him about delayed retirement credits before he claimed. They did not, because it is not automatic guidance, it is information you generally have to ask for. Donna assumed SSDI and Medicare savings programs were separate systems that did not talk to each other. Anthony assumed that because he was the one receiving disability benefits, his children were not entitled to anything of their own. In every case, the mistake was the same. They assumed that if a benefit existed, someone would tell them about it automatically. That is simply not how this system works. Social Security is what is sometimes called an application-driven system, meaning in most cases, you have to know a benefit exists and specifically apply for it. Nobody at the Social Security Administration is combing through your file looking for extra money to hand you. That responsibility, unfortunately, falls on you or on someone helping you navigate the process. This is exactly why checking your My Social Security account online is so important. If you have not created one yet, it takes about 10 minutes at ssa.gov, and it lets you see your earnings record, your estimated benefits at different claiming ages, and any notices the administration has sent you. Donna actually found out about her eligibility for a small retirement benefit by logging into that account and noticing an earnings summary she had forgotten about entirely. Now, let's talk about something that trips up almost everyone, whether you are 70 or 37. Social Security notices, the actual letters that arrive in your mailbox, are famous for being confusing. They are full of reference numbers, legal language, and formatting that looks like it was designed in 1985, because in some cases, it basically was. If you ever open one of these letters and do not understand what it is asking of you, do not throw it away and do not ignore it, hoping it resolves itself. Call the Social Security Administration directly at the number printed on the letter, or visit your local field office in person. It might take a few minutes on hold, but a 5-minute phone call has saved families thousands of dollars in benefits they almost missed. Let's go back to Anthony's family one more time, because there is a hidden rule here that applies specifically to people receiving SSDI, and it trips up more families than almost anything else on this list. When Anthony first went on disability, someone at his local office mentioned something called a trial work period, but he barely remembers the conversation because he was overwhelmed at the time. Here is what that means in plain English. If you are receiving SSDI and you want to try going back to work, even part-time, Social Security allows you a trial period where you can test your ability to work without immediately losing your disability benefits. For a certain number of months, you can earn above the usual limit and still receive your full SSDI payment. This exists specifically so that people are not terrified to attempt returning to the workforce out of fear that one paycheck will end their benefits permanently. Anthony never used this provision because nobody explained it to him clearly at the time, and by the time his daughter's question at Thanksgiving got him digging through his old paperwork, he realized there had been an entire window of opportunity he never took advantage of. If you or someone you love is on SSD and wondering whether working again is even possible, this trial work period is worth researching directly on ssa.gov or discussing with a Social Security representative, because the rules are specific and they matter. Let's talk for a moment about Medicare, because Donna's story opened a door we have not fully walked through yet. Medicare has 4 main parts, and almost nobody explains them clearly the first time. Part A helps cover hospital stays. Part B, as we mentioned earlier, helps cover doctor visits and outpatient care. Part C, sometimes called Medicare Advantage, is a private insurance alternative that bundles Parts A and B, often with extra benefits. And Part D covers prescription drugs. On top of all of that, there is a program called Extra Help, which assists people with limited income in paying for their Part D prescription drug costs, including premiums, deductibles, and co-payments. Donna qualified for Extra Help the same year she discovered her Medicare Savings Program eligibility, and between the two programs, her monthly healthcare costs dropped by more than she expected. Here is a hidden rule that catches people off guard almost every year. Extra Help and Medicare savings programs have separate applications, separate income thresholds, and are administered slightly differently depending on your state, even though they often work together. Just because you qualify for one does not automatically mean you are enrolled in the other. You typically need to apply for each one separately, either through the Social Security Administration for Extra Help or through your state Medicaid office for the Medicare savings programs. Before you make that decision to just assume you do not qualify for any of this because your income seems too high, it is worth actually checking the current thresholds because they are adjusted periodically, and many people are surprised to learn they fall under the limit when they finally check the actual numbers instead of guessing. Let's bring this back to the emotional core of why any of this matters, because at the end of the day, this is not really about government paperwork. It is about dignity. It is about a retired firefighter who spent 3 decades running into burning buildings, finally getting every dollar he is owed in retirement. It is about a former librarian on a fixed income not having to choose between medication and groceries. It is about a father with a bad back making sure his teenage daughter gets the support she is entitled to, even when he cannot work the way he used to. These systems can feel cold and bureaucratic, full of forms and acronyms and hold music that never seems to end. But underneath all of that, Social Security exists because of a simple idea. People who work hard, or who become disabled, or who lose a spouse, or who simply grow old, should not have to face those chapters of life without support. The tragedy is not that the system is imperfect. The tragedy is when people who qualify for help never receive it, simply because nobody explained it to them in plain language. So here's what we would encourage you to do this week, regardless of which of these 3 situations feels closest to your own life. Create or log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov and actually read through your earnings record and benefit estimates. If you are recently widowed or widowed years ago and never claimed the lump sum death payment, make one phone call to ask about it. If you were married for 10 years or longer and are now divorced, ask about your options for a divorced spouse benefit. If you are receiving SSDI and curious about returning to work, ask specifically about the trial work period. If you or a family member is on a limited income, ask your state Medicaid office directly about Medicare savings programs and Extra Help. And if you are approaching retirement age and have not yet claimed, take a serious look at what delayed retirement credits could mean for your specific situation before you make a decision you cannot take back. None of this requires a lawyer or a financial advisor, though speaking with one certainly does not hurt if your situation is complicated. Most of what we covered today simply requires a phone call, a little patience, and the willingness to ask a direct question instead of assuming the answer is no. Before we wrap up, we want to hear from you because your experiences genuinely shape what we cover on this channel. What age did you begin collecting your Social Security retirement benefits? And looking back, do you think you claimed at the right time? Let us know in the comments below because we read every single one. And sometimes your stories end up shaping future videos just like this one. If this video helped you understand something you did not know before, do us a favor and share it with a friend or family member who might need to hear it too. Somebody out there, maybe your neighbor, maybe your sibling, maybe someone in your own household, is sitting on a benefit just like Michael, Donna, and Anthony were, without even realizing it. And if you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to Prime Move Guide because we publish new videos on Social Security, Medicare, and retirement planning every single week, breaking down exactly this kind of information in plain, honest English. Before we get to that final ask, let's slow down for a second and talk about something almost every viewer watching this has experienced firsthand: checking a bank account on the morning a Social Security deposit is supposed to land. There is a very specific kind of anxiety that comes with watching that balance, especially if you are living close to the edge financially. Donna has told us she still checks her phone the night before her deposit date, even though it has arrived on time every single month for the past 3 years. That is not irrational. That is what it feels like when a fixed income becomes the backbone of your entire life. Understanding these 5 benefits is not about squeezing extra dollars out of a faceless system. It is about closing the gap between that anxiety and a little more breathing room. Let's talk about one more myth, because this one shows up constantly in the comments section of videos just like this one, and it deserves a direct answer. Some viewers believe that applying for one of these lesser-known benefits could somehow put their existing benefits at risk, that asking too many questions might trigger some kind of review that reduces what they already receive. That fear is understandable, but it is largely unfounded. Reviews of your case, sometimes called continuing disability reviews for SSDI recipients, happen on their own schedule, based on your medical condition and case type, not because you called to ask about a divorced spouse benefit or the lump sum death payment. Asking a question about eligibility for an additional benefit is not the same thing as opening an audit on the benefit you already have. If anything, Social Security representatives we have spoken with over the years say they would rather field 10 extra phone calls a day than have a single eligible family miss out on money they are owed. Let's return one final time to Michael, Donna, and Anthony, because their stories taken together tell us something important about how this system actually works in real life, not in theory. Michael eventually decided that, given his health and his financial situation, claiming when he did was still the right call for him personally, even after learning about delayed retirement credits. That is worth repeating, because this video is not trying to convince you that waiting is always smarter. It is trying to make sure you have the information to make that decision on purpose, instead of by accident. Donna, on the other hand, ended up with a modest but meaningful boost to her monthly income once she combined her small retirement benefit with her SSDI payment and her newly discovered Medicare Savings Program enrollment. And Anthony is now seriously considering testing his ability to return to part-time electrical work, using the trial work period as a safety net, something he would never have attempted without understanding how that provision actually protects him. 3 different outcomes, 3 different decisions. But in every case, the difference between confusion and clarity came down to the same thing: someone finally explaining the rules in language that made sense.